Alice Stoltz, Managing Editor of Domain. Welcome. Now, I know you have some very, very big property news for us today.
Probably the biggest property news in quite some time. So Domain's national prestige writer Lucy Macken has been toiling away on a story which we published very late last night about a sale that completely smashes all price records in Australia, where we've announced this morning that a $140 million sale has gone through, which makes this the biggest residential sale in Australian history.
Wow. 140 million. It's hard to get your mind around that number for a property. That's incredible.
It is. So this is the Barangaroo penthouse.
Barangaroo South at 1 Sydney Harbour. So there's a complex tower we can see now, and it's the tower. So it's a penthouse and the sub penthouse below it.
Right. So this is almost two properties in a way.
Yeah. So a very savvy buyer has combined them, mashed it up to make it a massive property.
Unbelievable. So 2 stories worth of prime Barangaroo territory. So talk us through, what does $140 million
So
get you?
It's actually over 3 stories, and it's 1,600 square metres. We've got
I'm just thinking about wandering around there aimlessly.
Hopefully it's big enough for you. We've got 9 bedrooms.
Right, yes.
8-metre ceilings, a swimming pool rooftop swimming pool.
Tick, tick, tick.
And beautifully designed by one of the world's most acclaimed architects, Renzo Piano.
My goodness. So there we go. Okay, so it's 2 stories, and they'll obviously put a lift or a stairwell to combine the sub-penthouse with the penthouse. Oh, I can't even imagine what this property must look like.
And it's an incredible building. So the architect, as I said, is Renzo Piano, who designed the Centre Pompidou in Paris and, of course, the London Shard, which is probably some of the most iconic architecture in the world now. So what we're going to see here is Australia is really going to be playing on that international stage of incredible show-stopping buildings.
Okay, so what was the last one that sold for a record price? Where were we sitting with that?
So last year we saw the sale of Fairwater in Point Piper, Sydney, which sold for $100 million. And as we also know, we've got James Packer's property next door to 1 Sydney Harbour sold, which was the most expensive apartment, which went for $60 million. So if you just think about that, this sale for an apartment, and James Packer paid $60 million next door, it really goes to show this is another level of a property.
Of course, this is billionaire territory. Of course, we know that Fairwater was bought by Mike Cannon-Brookes, the tech billionaire, co-founder of Atlassian. So is there any idea who might be behind this purchase?
No, so we've heard from the developer Lendlease it has been bought by a local buyer. Okay. Not as yet, but I can assure you our team will be on to finding that out, because of course the advised identity is always very intriguing to people, but at the moment it's under tight confidentiality.
Right, so where do we sit in the international market with a property of that price? Are we up there, or is this still, you know, a little Aussie property?
It's a great question, Shell, and all of a sudden we are up there. So if you look at what's been selling around the world, we've got One Hyde Park in London for $225 million, Penthouse in New York for $100 million, Singapore $80 million, Sierra Towers in LA for $58 million, and of course One Madison New York for $50 million. So that just goes to show we are now really leading the charge in many ways here.
Gee, these numbers are just staggering.
They really are.
And I think it talks a lot about this trend that Australians are now having towards apartment living. You know, New York and London traditionally have been those cities that have got high-rise apartments which offer a whole lifestyle of luxury that comes with it. And in Australia, we've always had very big estates with perhaps a polo field or a tennis court or a pool and every other bell and whistle. But this is really talking about vertical living.
It's quite funny, isn't it, in a way, to be talking about buying off the plan, which is something that we talk about occasionally, usually for little 1-bedroom places, and then here we are talking off the plan for a new record breaker in Australia. So yeah, it's fascinating to see this vertical living now coming into this really ultra high end.
Yeah, level. And I wonder if a lot of it's about the ease that people want to live with now. People don't want to maintain a property. You know, we know when Fairwater was sold that the owner had to then spend some money on renovations. We can pretty much assume that a property like this will not require renovation, given it's scheduled to be completed in 2023. So it's got a few years until the owner can actually move into it.
And I would assume this owner may not necessarily have Sydney as their only base.
Yeah, I would think that's part of the appeal of apartments, is that people want an apartment they can lock and leave.
And take perhaps the pet with you. Make sure the neighbours are happy.
They could well do, and perhaps jet over to the south of France for the Northern Hemisphere summer. You know, I think we're seeing more and more of the appeal of people being able to do that.